Hello, everybody. It's Lenny Murphy with Greenbook here with another in our CEO series. And, all of these are special, but today I'm actually particularly excited because we are talking to Sasha Eder, CEO of Newton X, who I've recently gotten to know as a company. So this is a very cool thing. Sasha, welcome.
Hi, Lenny.
Oh, thanks for making the time. So we'll dive into why I think this is a cool interview about Newton X in just a minute. But for those that aren't familiar with you and the company itself, why don't you give us a quick overview of who you are and what the company is?
Sure. Yeah. So my name is Sasha. I'm originally from Germany, so true immigrant. Lived in Europe, Spain and France before moving to the US. Studied MIT. Made my way to the West Coast and worked for McKinsey for a while, in Seattle and San Francisco in the startup world and the tech world, basically. And then realized that, especially in consulting companies like McKinsey, you have to conduct a lot of primary research, B2B research in particular. And it was very challenging for us to get the right insights and get access to the right professionals to get the insights we needed. And the existing services, even though they're helpful, weren't really, giving us what we needed. So we decided to think about a better way to do B2B market research. And so basically NewtonX is an AI-driven B2B knowledge access platform. That's how we call it. And we leverage technology to basically custom recruit any B2B professional in the world and power the largest enterprise companies with insights, whether it's qualitative or quantitative, for their B2B needs to make business decisions.
That is very cool. Now, so this is why I've been excited about this one. I got a random email from one of your sales teams. So by the way, your targeting was pretty good a few months back. And I thought, oh, this is really cool because my background when my previous full service research company, Rockhopper, we did mostly B2B research. And, at that point in the mid 2000s, it was, if you're doing healthcare, that was one thing, right? There were lots of access to healthcare professionals. But anything else, there was at that point eRewards, which is now Dynata. They were kind of the go-to until LinkedIn made a foray into the industry, right? And then they quickly realized, oh no, this sucks. We're not going to do this anymore. So they bailed out of the industry. So it's been very challenging to find the right population for many B2B researchers, as you know. So when I learned a little more about what you were doing, I thought, okay, now that is really cool. It's effectively, forgive my analogy, but the way I correlated was, there's things like LinkedIn Sales Navigator and these targeting tools that exist in those platforms. So, okay, you're doing that on steroids to identify the appropriate people based upon the target and then custom recruit. Very cool. And for our audience, so you'll know, I was so impressed with the idea that we recently worked with Newton X to supplement the Grit survey that just came out of field. So we thought, you know what, let's work with Newton X to bring in 200 client side buyers of research to supplement the Grit sample, and you guys knocked it out of the park. We were actually looking at the data yesterday. It looks fantastic. So really great. You hit the target exactly what we were looking for. So so I've been impressed and think it's something well needed. So there's my kudos to you from industry wide and personal experience. Now, what have you guys found as you've entered into this space and been growing? How's it going for you?
Do you mean particularly how do we go about B2B research, or do you mean more about the trajectory of the company?
Trajectory of the company for the moment. We'll dive a little more into the technology in just a minute.
Yeah, so I think the trajectory of the company was extremely interesting. So we started off with this idea, and the moment we reached out to clients, which in the beginning was very organically, basically me, myself, and a few maybe team members in the early stages, just leveraging the network, and it resonated extremely well to the point where we felt we had product market fit very early on, and after that it was just operationalizing the process where people really said there's a true pain point in market research, which is B2B. B2C research is well established, a lot of providers, it's pretty well penetrated, but B2B, huge pain point. And I think one of the big reasons why it was such a big pain point is because very often It was just B2C research being retrofitted for B2B purposes,
Right.
instead of really dedicating something focused on B2B, because I think B2B never had the same, value in market research that B2C had. B2C had this huge share, and then B2B came after.
Yeah,
So
well, it's a smaller portion of the industry from a revenue perspective. So yeah, yeah.
Which we strongly believe, by the way, in our vision, it's going to be much bigger than it is today, because if you enable it with the right technology, it's going to open a market that today is not accessible, which is basically any professional in the world and any company needs insights. And if the experience is smooth enough, and you just go as a head of marketing and say, I need to launch this product, but I know somebody out there did it before, you just connect from Nutanix to that person, and you did B2B research, right? That's what we envision the market to be. So it's going to be huge. But that being said, so over the first 3-4 years, product market fit was there, and then we had organic growth. So what's very interesting about us compared to most startups start off and then all they do is putting their funding into sales and marketing, right, to grow and get visibility. We didn't have a sales and marketing team until the beginning of this year. Everything we did over years was organic growth, where also kudos to the market research industry, our clients were extremely generous in spreading the word and telling their colleagues and industry peers and clients about us, so that we were growing organically, until we decided this year, well, this is going great, but let's institutionalize a sales and marketing team to really systematically grow the brand and the awareness.
Okay, that's so hence why I started getting the emails from you. So that's when you very cool. So let's talk. You made an interesting comment about about opening up, and I think there's an analogy here. If we look at the past year, obviously, within qualitative research, right? The online qualitative I was doing online focus, it was 2008, right? You couldn't give them away. So just because it seems as if that we reached a point with qualitative that now circumstances force everybody to adapt. Scalable solutions were in place already. So when the market was ready, boom, it exploded, right? And my personal hypothesis is that it's always been the industry's been about 20% qual, 80% quant, and we're going to see that shift now, because now the ability for it to shift at scale exists. So if I hear you correctly, you're thinking that we'll see the same paradigm with the correlation between B2B and B2C, that now that a scalable solution, a cost-efficient, efficient overall process exists to enable effective scalable B2B research, that you'll see greater uptake across the board. Is that a pretty good assessment?
That's a pretty good assessment. I would say two things to that. One, we're really trying to disrupt the existing B2B market research notion, which is we take existing product like a quant survey, like a qual, and we change the methodology, which increases the quality and just the approach and maybe also the timelines. But at the same time, we're also trying to just overall change the notion of B2B market research, which is, think of it as like a knowledge exchange, almost like a stock market, where anybody has needs of B2B research. And if you make it easy enough through a platform, then individuals come together and just exchange. And we have done this, for example, already in the form of these high-end communities where we put like 20 marketing directors together, and they just brainstorm ideas and exchange and come together, right? And then come up with ideas that help each other. And so if you scale that up, right, and you think about B2B research not just as you have to prepare a questionnaire and then run the interviews and analyze, but it's more like on the spot, you have a need, you create an exchange, that's when you have knowledge exchange in B2B.
So do you envision then owning that additional piece of value of the value chain, rather than just recruiting, but also have the enabling technology for conducting some elements of research, such as those kind of ad hoc communities as well?
Yeah, and we're already doing that. So have a big piece of technology, which is the identification of professionals, the recruiting, and then we have our platform that just enables these individuals to come together and then brainstorm together with our clients or among themselves to exchange knowledge.
Very cool. All right, so so GLG and those companies better be paying attention then. So okay, got it. That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool, Sasha. I'm seeing that MIT and McKinsey background. Seeing that manifest there. So you've you grew organically. I know you did a Series A, and you're about to go for more growth. So what does the world look like to you 2 years from now? What are the kind of the goals that you see if you look at your overall roadmap and trajectory?
Yeah, I think I'm seeing two things. So the first one is, as I mentioned, we're really at a turning point where we started the marketing and sales efforts. We still get a lot of organic growth, and that's great, but we really want to institutionalize the awareness in the brand, because we know, interestingly enough, every single company that does a pilot with us, and that's why I was so excited to hear the results from the grid study that you mentioned. They are really impressed by the results. So we usually let the results speak for themselves, and then the clients come back to us, right? And so we're trying to get this to as many clients out there as possible. And so we really want to grow, within the enterprise sector, within the market research sector, and make this technology available to as many people as possible. The way we think about it right now is we think of it as we are the best kept secret in market research out there that everyone should know about, but right now it's just still a relatively small circle that's really using us. And so that just shows you the potential. And so, by doing that, we're really providing a better service for existing B2B market research, whether it's qual, whether it's quant, whether it's online communities, whether it's hopefully soon again in-person focus groups. So that's one big area. And then the other one is really this platform play that we really envision, which is eventually the end vision for us is to create a self-serve marketplace. The custom recruiting methodology will allow us to grow our community to get to that point. And then you really have a marketplace of like high quality, top-notch professionals, probably the best in the world, with 40 plus search filters, extremely advanced, as you mentioned. It's like a Google search on steroids that allows our clients to go extremely deep in the profiling and segmentation of the audiences they want to speak to. But then they have very easy access. They can create them themselves, and they can do whatever they want, whether it's a 1 minute, I have this one question, or I want to run this 2-hour focus group. It's completely up to them. And that's really the end vision that we see going towards.
That is very cool and exciting, Sasha. Oh, a little bit of echo. Sorry. The still hearing that. Did something change on your end?
No.
Nope. A little. Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
Okay. Whatever. I think we're okay. That is very exciting, and I suspect that there will be many players in the industry who listen to this interview, and you just became an acquisition target. So for quite a few folks. So for whatever that's worth, I'll put that out there. That's an exciting journey, and it's certainly aligned with every trend that I see in the industry, right? So it's actually, I was going to ask whether you're going to move towards a self-service solution. Glad to hear you saying that. That is absolutely where things have to go. Now, let's dive in a little bit more, because you're using the word marketplace versus panel. And I think that is an incredibly important differentiation here. So let's talk a little more about that difference and how you think about that, because you're not panelizing people, you're recruiting people and engaging them. But are you seeing a repeat engagement with some of these, particularly high in demand value folks, IT professionals, for instance, would be one. So are you seeing a migration more towards kind of a managed panel approach, or do you think it's just this custom engagement, almost a gig network, if you will, for these people for insights?
Yeah, that's a great question, Lenny. So we don't really like the word panel for a number of reasons. The way we think about our professionals is more, as you mentioned, a marketplace or a community. And the reason for that is the following. The way we think is, we believe we understand what it takes to reach a certain type of audience, whether it's a CISO or a head of marketing or a director of finance. And we really know what makes them feel appreciated, and we value their time fairly and compensate them appropriately. And I think that's a very, very important, notion compared to, I would say, the traditional way of a panel, where it's typically coming from the B2C research side with extremely low incentives in the $5 to maybe $25 range, where we believe, if you truly want to run a tracker with 100 CISOs of Fortune 500 companies, do we really believe that a CISO is going to take a $5 payment for a 20-minute survey and then has the motivation to give high quality input, right? And that's really where we think we're changing the game a bit, because we really make them feel valued. And so instead of saying, hey, we're going to put you into a panel, we say we're going to create a community around you of like-minded CISOs that you can exchange with, that you can learn and benefit from. And on top of it, you can share your experience with clients that help them, in their, let's say, cybersecurity approaches and benefit. And as in return, we compensate you fairly for it. And that's why we think of more as a community rather than a panel. And we think that's the future, right? If you think about LinkedIn, LinkedIn did many things extremely well, but I think there's still an opportunity to take a similar concept like LinkedIn, but instead of making it resume based, you make it knowledge based, and you create you put even more of an exchange among people. And that's where we're trying to go towards.
Yeah, it's very cool. Yeah, I mean, I've often thought I belong to GLG and a couple of those, expert networks, and the it's very specialized, obviously, with my area of experience. But I have appreciated that, when I engage in one of those, my billable rate is $500 an hour, right? As a consultant, that's what I bill, and it doesn't mean I won't engage in other conversations for less than that, but for that type of engagement, an hour-long consultation with whatever. I'm not going to do it for 25 bucks, So so I've appreciated it, but I've also seen the opportunities for changing that model and scaling it up. I think there are built-in inherent limits to the existing kind of expert network model. And it sounds like you've reverse engineered that and recognized where those limits are and have built a solution for it to provide real scale. It's when you mentioned LinkedIn, right? That makes a lot of sense too. So is there a thought of NewtonX launching something that kind of seems a little more like LinkedIn, but based upon knowledge versus resume? Is that a piece that you can't answer?
Interesting question. I think this goes really back to our self-serve marketplace, right? Which in one form or another will have these elements, right? And it goes back to what you said earlier. How can we create very engaged communities, right, that are really interested in participating in studies on a regular basis, but at the same time, when they're not participating in studies, have the ability to benefit from being part of this community, which is going to happen in the form of exchanging with other professionals in the industry. And just, it's all about exchanging knowledge, learning from each other, and growing together as professionals.
All right, so I just had a thought, and I may get kicked for this, so I'm gonna put it out there publicly. Grid has been a challenge for many years for a variety of reasons. But we get it done, right? But periodically we thought, okay, we tried to build a panel in a community. The engagement was so awful, it wasn't worthwhile to do that. But I still love the idea of building an engaged community of research professionals that are on demand. Because a lot of the kickback we get for Grid is, oh my God, this is a 20-minute survey. This sucks. Yeah, well, because I can't get you to give me attention except for twice a year. So I got to ask you everything at once because, it's the classic research problem. So I would love to have a conversation to see what does it look like if we utilize kind of the NewtonX model specifically to build this community of insights professionals globally. So there's a follow-up. So audience, I don't know if it's going to work or not, but for those who are listening, I hear you. You don't like taking 20-minute long surveys twice a year. I get it. So maybe there's a path of working with Sasha and NewtonX to do something different. We'll see where we get to. So
and what we hear a lot from our professionals, right, that like yourself have been experts, let's say in other places where they're also being presented with opportunities. Very often, let's say your expertise is in market research, right? You start getting almost bombarded with a lot of opportunities and emails where one might think, well, this is great, but then only 10% of those opportunities are really tailored towards your expertise, and everything else discarding as like, well, this is not relevant for me, right? And that's another big problem where, again, given our very precise search and targeting filters, our professionals are really being presented only with opportunities that really fit their expertise. So when we reach out to them, we don't bother them, but they know it's relevant compared to other places where you get bombarded. And at some point, you also stop looking at the opportunities because you're like, well, it's not worth my time if 90% is not relevant for, what I'm doing.
Yeah, no, it happens all the time. And LinkedIn Pro Finder, right? I get stuff LinkedIn Pro Finder every other day. And I think once there was something that actually I thought, well, no, that's interesting. Everything else, like, why am I getting this? This is stupid. So yeah, totally get that and agree. And so that targeting component, let's I'm going to be cautious of time, but without giving away the secret sauce, can you talk a little bit about what drives your algorithm to be so precise from a targeting perspective? How you do it? How do you work your magic to find people like me that look? Lenny's only going to be focused on market research. That's his expertise. That's what he wants to talk about. How do you find us?
Yeah, of course. So we, I think launched it publicly a few weeks ago, right? So there's no secret about it, but we're basically using what we call internally the knowledge graph. And the knowledge graph is our proprietary search technology. And as I mentioned earlier, from the very beginning, we were not resume based, but we are knowledge based. And so we really think about, I don't care so much where you worked and how long you worked there. What I really care about is what do you know? What are your skills? What tools do you know? What products do you know? What is some knowledge you acquired by being in a certain industry or being in a certain company? So that's really the angle we take. And that allows us to segment profiles much more granularly than if you just take a resume approach and you say, well, he or she worked 5 years at Coca-Cola and 2 years at Pepsi, and you just look at it from that angle. So that's the first place. And so we really specialize from the very beginning when ingesting professionals into our knowledge graph to have the structure of based around knowledge. And that's what allows us to have these search filters that are more granular than what you would have on LinkedIn or in any other place, which gives us a huge advantage. And then, we have a big data science team in the background that does nothing else than just on a daily basis optimizing that flow, which is, we're looking at huge data sets. We're talking about 1.1 billion professionals. And so they're working on optimizing, methodologies on being as precise as possible. So there are a number of data science methods where, for example, if you miss information in certain areas, you can use inference and other statistical models to, approximate with what probability that someone knows certain types of information. So if you do that and you combine that with then the, in-field experience, so when people actually participate in research, what do they actually know or not know, and you have a feedback loop back into your graph, that's when you start creating real value, because you start creating your own data points around what do people really know. And that allows us to, be extremely precise in subsequent studies and be extremely detailed. So we know somebody knows about AWS migration or somebody is using Azure Kubernetes, right? And so that's when it gets really interesting, when you start generating your own proprietary data points.
Yeah, that's cool. So one of my startups, Veriglyph, is working on a blockchain-based personal data graph at the individual level, consumer. So I totally get that. We're looking for correlations around, all the linked data assets to identify a person, based on multiple variables. So yeah, preach to the choir. So I had a question and now it just lost me. I haven't been fully caffeinated yet, Sasha. I'm sorry. The that's all exciting, cool stuff, and I hope that we have a chance to talk more because I think what you're doing is really, really, really interesting. And I think the industry's really going to perk up and pay attention. And let's follow up on that conversation about targeting the research industry specifically, because that's something that's near and dear to my heart too. So before we wrap up, is there anything that you'd like to share with the audience that we haven't touched on?
I would say one thing that we're very proud of is our rebranding. So we rebranded in March. So if you go to our website, you will see our new identity, which is something we really identify with now. And the reason why we decided to rebrand is really we wanted to better express who we are, what we do, and we felt like you couldn't really tell that when you were looking at the website previously. But now if you go through it, you look at our, philosophy, I think it really reflects what we're trying to do in B2B market research and why we think we are the best player in B2B market research, because we're really taking an approach that's so radically different. And I think that's what's really needed in market research. Somebody needs to come in with a fresh perspective, rethink from the ground up what is required to make this work. Because market research is an industry that's been around for so many years, and so many great things came out of it, but you tend to, fall into inertia if you do things long enough. And so you need to, at some point, just forget about everything and take a very fresh approach.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that we live in that era right now. It's exciting, right? If you look at most of the innovation in the industry has not come from inside the industry, it comes from outside the industry with folks that are reverse engineering and saying, look, there's a better way to do this, or potentially a better way to do that. And, I think you're one more example of a series of companies that are doing that and gaining a lot of traction and success. It's an exciting time. It's not necessarily an exciting time for the traditionalists in the industry, but for everybody else. And again, if I was still running a B2B focused primary research company, I'd be all over you, right? I mean, I wish you had existed in 2009, right? So, because that was our world, and it was challenging to identify these folks. Again, I was so disappointed when LinkedIn, when they jumped in, it was exciting, but then, and this is what I was going to mention earlier. Sorry, their experience was because the industry was not focused on the respondent experience, the screening process, right? The way we would structure screeners and screen people out, they tried to influence the industry, say, no, you don't need to screen. We know who these people are, so here, don't ask your screeners. And the industry would not adapt. So finally they said, yeah, this is a pain in the ass, it's not worth it. So, they stopped. So here's the question, the final question. Have you, with your ability to pinpoint screen, are you seeing a change in behavior of your customers to realize they don't need to go through that screening process the same way that we've done in the past, because you can do that up front?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So completely understand, with everything going on in market research with, fraudulent responses and, bad data, that customers are very wary and they want to make sure they get what they pay for, right? But that's really the big differentiator with us, where we tell our clients, look, we know exactly who our professionals are, 100% verified, right? We just recently had a quote from a client that said, we just removed 50% of the sample from the panels we're using. You guys were spot on 100%. We didn't remove a single person, right? And that's the difference. And so once customers really understand that notion, there is a certain level of declining return with a screener, where you can also screen out good people, because nobody's perfect. And if your screener is too complex and it confuses people, it screens out people that otherwise would be qualified, right? And so we are working with our clients on optimizing the screeners so that it creates a good experience for the respondents as much as it provides the guarantee for them to get the right data. Because providing a positive respondent experience also creates re-engagement, higher quality, right? And that's what we were talking about earlier. And so there's definitely a trend towards, if you trust the data enough, and if you trust what's coming in, you can actually reduce the screener, which also, reduces cost for you, faster fielding time, better experience. So there are a lot of advantages if you do it the right way.
Yep, no, agreed. All right, so we could go on for another hour talking about that. We'll hold that for another conversation. But this has been great. Congratulations on all the success. And again, for anybody out there, we are digging into the data right now from NewtonX. I can tell you that the NewtonX data, excuse me, looks better, is cleaner than from our own internal sample lists. So, and within Grit. So take that for what it's worth. But at this point, I'm a believer. You guys did a great job. And so there's this, you have the Lenny seal of approval. So
that's me for years. Thank you.
All right, Sasha, you be well. Take care, and we'll talk again very soon.
Thank you so much, Lenny.
Thank you.